After the two recent mass shootings, the news has been full of stories about 173 mass shootings this year alone. Well, let's look at that number. It may not be as true as everyone thinks. It's true that, the FBI says that a mass shooting is where 4 or more people are killed or injured to be classified as a mass shooting event. However, sometimes the number doesn't reveal the truth, and one has to assume that the media is trying to play a role in making policy and changing laws. And they're doing that by misrepresenting the numbers. And it's true, there have been 173 incidents of mass shooting this year, as of the recording of this video, in which 228 people were killed. However, there were 62 incidents that had no deaths at all, so you could bring that down to 110 events where people were killed. The number is high, indisputably high. However, the situation isn't always as it seems. The Radical magazine and website, Mother Jones, is cognizant of the fact that not all mass shootings are created equal. In fact, they do not consider a mass shooting that Mother Jones sees the whole thing slightly differently. Many of the sites recording these polls will include the death of the perpetrator in the list of the number dead. Mother Jones says 3+ shot and killed in one incident, excluding the perpetrators at a public place. And Mother Jones most say that 3 or more persons shot in one incident, excluding perpetrator at one location at roughly the same time. Their list excludes mass shootings which they feel are conventionally motivated, such as gang violence, armed robberies, and while it doesn't state it in Wikipedia, domestic violence is also excluded. That comes under conventionally motivated. Mother Jones is far from what one would consider a conservative magazine. In fact, when it first came out back in the 70s, it was considered a bellwether of the radical left. And I accept the fact that they say that things such as armed robbery or gang violence, organized crime violence, and I'm on the edge with domestic violence, but the fact is a family member who is in the depths of depression or in a psychotic state may well know what they're doing and why, but it's not random. And what Mother Jones looks at in particular are events that were perpetrated by mentally unstable individuals. And that brings the total number down of mass killings by random individuals down to 5, because these are the ones that are truly random and the ones that scare people greatly. One can understand what happens when a family member hits the depths of depression and does something horrendous, but they tend to do it only to their family member. Gang violence, drive-by shootings tend to be less than discriminate in their targets. Armed robberies, the same is true. They'll hold up a business and try to eliminate all witnesses, which to me is just adding insult to injury, because especially if you held up a bank, you're going to do 20 years anyways. So why not just tack on 4 or 5 either life sentences or death sentences? That's, to me, is silly and not well thought out. So why do people say 173 mass shootings this year and or killed? That brings your total up to 173. Some places say that 4 or more shot or killed. The FBI says 4 or more shot or killed in one incident, excluding the perpetrator at one location at roughly the same time. But what is the explanation for the shooting? I mean, some things can't be explained. Others can. And I'm all for not including the perpetrators in the listing of deaths, because that does to an extent take away the pity and support that the families should receive. Does that mean that the families of Audrey Hale and Connor Sturgeon don't deserve pity for their loss? They do. They very much do. Parents often have, or family members in general, often have no idea what is going on in the perpetrator's mind, and they are understandably shocked when they commit these heinous crimes, but often they go into this with the expectation of committing suicide by cop. Why they decided to take 5 or 6 people with them, I don't know. Doesn't make any sense. You commit suicide by cop much easier by just standing out on the street and pointing a gun at a cop. And you don't have to take anyone with you when that happens. But again, who can understand what is going on in their minds? Sometimes they leave writings behind, sometimes they don't. To make that point even clearer, prior to the shooting, Connor Sturgeon had messaged a friend saying that he felt suicidal and said he wanted to kill as many people in the bank as he could. So his intention was suicide by cop right from the start. So bearing in mind that the vast majority of these shootings were not done by some thoroughly deranged person, but by someone who wanted, for lack of a better term, an honor guard in hell, one has to look at prior signs or mental health problems, in which case there are at least 2 examples of the random mass shooters. Hugh Cantren, the 72-year-old man who shot up the LA dance studios during Chinese New Year, and Connor Sturgeon showed prior signs of mental health problems. The rest hadn't, and one will never know what they were thinking. But another misrepresentation by the media or the politicians, let's just say the ones seeking to do something political, is that they were all using an assault rifle. Well, assault style rifle is probably better because an assault rifle fires both semi-auto and full auto like a machine gun. And guns of that nature are not available to the public. So let's see, how many rifles were used this year? Well, 3. But in fact, 3 of them, 2 of them, the weapon used, the Michigan State University shooting and the Half Moon Bay spree killing, were committed with handguns. And that shouldn't surprise anybody. Handguns are comparatively inexpensive and definitely concealable, which if you're going to commit a mass shooting, you definitely don't want people to see you coming. That's what stopped the Monterey Park shooter, Hugh Cantren. He was going into a dance studio. The doorman saw that he was carrying an assault rifle and locked the door. But if he'd been carrying a handgun, he likely would have just come in and had a free run of the place. Even if it wasn't an extended capacity magazine in a handgun, it takes, well, if someone is well practiced, it takes less than a second to drop a magazine out and put a new one in. So saying that, oh, they had to have a large 30-round or 20-round magazine and this and that, no. I was a soldier for 4 years. I can guarantee you that even with an M16 practiced, or an AR-15, if you're relatively practiced, it takes 2 seconds maybe, less if you're ready to swap out magazines and continue shooting. And anyone using a 30-round magazine is a fool. We learned how they learned all the way back in Vietnam that the 30-round banana magazines were notorious for jamming up on about your last 5 or 6 rounds, maybe even earlier. And to say that the AR-15 is the weapon of choice, or the Bushmaster, which is roughly the same gun, is the weapon of choice, well, that's not always been true. The Mother Jones mass shooting database goes all the way back to 1982. And as you go back in time, you find that using an AR-15 is actually a very new phenomenon. In fact, probably you're only going to see that starting about, well, very recently, actually. Because as you go back, you find that the majority of mass shootings were done by handguns. So saying we need to ban AR-15, SKS, AK-47 style rifles to protect the public from mass shootings, it's foolishness. A mass killer is going to find a way to kill you. A mass shooter is going to find ways to kill their intended victims. And it doesn't require an assault rifle. Like I said, you go back in time and you find the majority of these shootings involved handguns. As I look at the database, the Mother Jones database, I see that quite a few people did have mental health problems, and I'm all in favor of red flag law. But of the shootings this year, that really only covers 2. The Chinese New Year shootings and the Louisville bank shooting. There were people who had prior signs of mental health issues. And that's not to say that many of these others didn't have mental health issues. Very likely true that they did. But how many family or friends are going to be willing to go to the prosecutor's office or the police and say, I think this person is a danger to themselves or others, and force them into a mental health review by a psychologist or psychiatrist. And even then, what's to say that they don't sit there and lie their asses off? They're labeled incompetent. Was Audrey Hale mentally disturbed? Some could say that Audrey Hale was mentally unstable, wanting to be trans, going from female to male, but that's not necessarily true. She didn't show signs of being unhinged. She was showing problems with getting over the death of a female friend, but that doesn't mean that you're mentally unstable. That simply means that you're broken up over the loss of someone close to you. That doesn't really qualify as mentally unstable. So red flag laws are only of a limited utility in keeping guns out of the hands of mass shooters. I don't know what the solution is. Like I said, I'm in favor of red flag laws, but nobody wants to be seen as a snitch or a rat. So they're most likely to just overlook behaviors that possibly do show mental instability simply because, well, that's your friend, You don't want to lose a friend, or you don't want to alienate your sibling or your son or daughter, but that may be what needs to be done. Mental illness has such a stigma in this country that people are very unlikely to want to say that someone they care about is showing signs of instability. Like I said, I don't have any idea what the solution to this problem is. Red flag laws are a start. Convincing friends and family to report someone as mentally unstable, maybe as these mass shootings start to pile up, that will lose some of its stigma, but I'm not counting on it. If you have a solution you think will work, let me know in the comments. I'm more than willing to listen, and we can engage in a respectful dialogue. That's all for today. Thanks for listening.